Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're gonna read some more Lenin today. This is says from "Can the Bolsheviks Retain State Power?" by V.I. Lenin. Let's see, this was first published in October 1917. Source: The Emancipation of Women from the Writings of V.I. Lenin. Let's see, this was in the magazine Proletariat, number 1 and 2. So let's go ahead and get into this. The proletariat, we are told, will not be able to set the state apparatus in motion. Since the 1905 revolution, Russia has been governed by 130,000 landowners who have perpetrated endless violence against 150 million people, heaped unconstrained abuse upon them, and condemned the vast majority to inhuman toil and semi-starvation. Yet we are told that the 240,000 members of the Bolshevik Party will not be able to govern Russia, govern her in the interests of the poor and against the rich. These 240,000 are already backed by no less than 1 million votes of the adult population. For this is precisely the proportion between the number of party members and the number of votes cast for the party that has been established by the experience of Europe and the experience of Russia as shown. For example, by the elections of the Petrograd City Council last August, we therefore already have, quote, a state apparatus, end quote, of 1 million people devoted to the socialist state for the sake of high ideals and not for the sake of a fat sum received on the 20th of every month. In addition to that, we have a magic way to enlarge our state apparatus tenfold at once, and at one stroke, a way which no capitalist state ever possessed or could possess. This magic way is to draw the working people, to draw the poor into the daily work of state administration. To explain how easy it will be to employ this magic way and how faultlessly it will operate, let us take the simplest and most striking example possible. The state is to forcibly evict a certain family from a flat and move another in. This often happens in the capitalist state, and it will also happen in our proletarian or socialist state. The capitalist state evicts a working class family which has lost its breadwinner and cannot pay the rent. The bailiff appears with police or militia, a whole squad of them. To effect an eviction in a working class district, a whole detachment of Cossacks is required. Why? Because the bailiff and the militiamen refuse to go without a very strong military guard. They know that the scene of an eviction arouses such fury among the neighbors, among thousands and thousands of people who have been driven to the verge of desperation, arouses such hatred towards the capitalists and the capitalist state, that the bailiff and the squad of militiamen run the risk of being torn to pieces at any minute. Large military forces are required. Several regiments must be brought into a big city, and the troops must come from some distant outlying region so that the soldiers will not be familiar with the life of the urban poor, so that the soldiers will not be infected with socialism. The proletarian state has to forcibly move a very poor family into a rich man's flat. Let us suppose that our squad of workers' militia is 15 strong, 2 sailors, 2 soldiers, 2 class-conscious workers, of whom let us suppose only 1 is a member of our party or a sympathizer, 1 intellectual, and 8 from the poor working people, of whom at least 5 must be women, domestic servants, unskilled laborers, and so forth. The squad arrives at the rich man's flat, inspects it, and finds that it consists of 5 rooms, occupied by 2 men and 2 women. You must squeeze up a bit into 2 rooms this winter, citizens, and prepare 2 rooms for 2 families now living in cellars, until the time when with the aid of the engineers, you are an engineer, aren't you? We have built good dwellings for everybody. You will have to squeeze up a little. Your telephone will serve 10 families. This will save 100 hours of work wasted on shopping and so forth. Now in your family there are 2 unemployed persons who can perform light work, a citizeness 55 years of age and a citizen 14 years of age. They will be on duty for 3 hours a day, supervising the proper distribution of provisions for 10 families and keeping the necessary account of this. The student citizen in our squad will now write out the slate order in 2 copies, and you will be kind enough to give us a signed declaration that you will faithfully carry it out. End quote. This, in my opinion, shows by means of striking examples of how the distinction between the old bourgeois and the new socialist state apparatus and state administration could be illustrated. We are not utopians. We know that an unskilled laborer or a cook cannot immediately get on the job of the state administration. In this we can agree with the cadets the Brezhovskaya and with Tsereteli. We differ, however, from these citizens in that we demand an immediate break with the prejudiced view that only the rich or officials chosen from rich families are capable of administering the state, of performing the ordinary, everyday work of administration. We demand that training in the work of state administration be conducted by class-conscious workers and soldiers, and that this beginning be begun at once, i.e., that a beginning be made at once in training all the working people, all the poor, for this work. We know that the cadets are also willing to teach the people democracy. Cadet ladies are willing to deliver lectures to domestic servants on equal rights for women in accordance with the best English and French sources. And also, at the very next concert meeting, before an audience of thousands, an exchange of kisses will be arranged on the platform. The cadet lady lecturer will kiss Brezhovskaya. Brezhovskaya will kiss ex-minister Tsereteli, and the grateful people will therefore receive an object lesson in Republican equality, liberty, and fraternity. Yes, we agree that the cadets, Brezhovskaya and Tsereteli, are in their own way devoted to democracy and are propagating it among the people. But what is to be done if our conception of democracy is somewhat different from theirs? In our opinion, to ease the incredible burdens and miseries of the war, and also to heal the terrible wounds the war has inflicted on the people, revolutionary democracy is needed. Revolutionary measures of the kind described in the example of the distribution of housing, accommodation in the interest of the poor. Exactly the same procedure must be adopted in both town and country for the distribution of provisions, clothing, footwear, etc., in respect of the land in the rural districts and so forth. For the administration of the state in this spirit, we can at once set in motion a state apparatus consisting of 10, if not 20 million people, an apparatus such as no capitalist state has ever known. We alone can create such an apparatus, for we are sure of the fullest and devoted sympathy of the vast majority of the population. We alone can create such an apparatus because we have class-conscious workers disciplined by long capitalist schooling. It was not for nothing that we went to learn in the school of capitalism. Workers who are capable of forming a workers' militia and of gradually expanding it, beginning to expand it at once, into a militia embracing the whole people. The class-conscious workers must lead, but for the work of administration, they can enlist the vast mass of the working and oppressed people. It goes without saying that this new apparatus is bound to make mistakes in taking its first steps, but did not the peasants make mistakes when they emerged from serfdom and began to manage their own affairs? Is there any way other than practice by which the people can learn to govern themselves and to avoid mistakes? Is there any way other than by proceeding immediately to genuine self-government by the people? The chief thing now is to abandon the prejudiced bourgeois intellectualist view that only special officials, who by their very social position are entirely dependent upon capital, can administer the state. The chief thing is to put an end to the state of affairs, in which the bourgeois officials and socialist ministers are trying to govern in old way, and quote socialist ministers are trying to govern in the old way, but are incapable of doing so, and after 7 months are faced with a peasant revolt in a peasant country. The chief thing is to imbue the oppressed and working people with confidence in their own strength, to prove to them in practice that they can and must themselves undertake the proper, most strictly regulated and organized distribution of bread, all kinds of food, milk, clothing, housing, etc., in the interest of the poor. Unless this is done, Russia cannot be saved from collapse and ruin. The conscientious, bold, universal move to hand over administrative work to proletarians and semi-proletarians will rouse such unprecedented revolutionary enthusiasm among the people, will so multiply the people's forces in combating distress, that much that seemed impossible to our narrow, old bureaucratic forces will become possible for the millions who will begin to work for themselves and not for the capitalists, the gentry, the bureaucrats, and not out of fear of punishment. To fear the resistance of the capitalists and yet to call oneself a revolutionary, to wish to be regarded as a socialist. Isn't that disgraceful? How low must international socialism, corrupted by opportunism, have fallen ideologically if such voices could be raised? We have already seen the strength of the capitalist resistance. The entire people have seen it. For the capitalists are more class conscious than the other classes, and at once realized the significance of the Soviets, at once exerted all their efforts to the utmost, resorted to everything, went to all lengths, resorted to the most incredible lies and slander, to military plots in order to frustrate the Soviets, to reduce them to naught, to prostitute them, with the aid of the Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries, that transformed them into talking shops to wear down the peasants and workers by months and months of empty talk and playing at revolution. We have not yet seen, however, the strength of resistance in the proletarians and poor peasants, for their strength will become fully apparent only when power is in the hands of the proletariat, when tens of millions of people who have been crushed by want and capitalist slavery see from experience and feel that state power has passed into the hands of the oppressed classes, that the state is helping the poor to fight the landowners and capitalists, is breaking their resistance. Only then shall we see what untapped forces of resistance to the capitalists are latent among the people. Only then will what Engels called latent socialism manifest itself. Only then, for every 1,000 overt and concealed enemies of working class rule manifesting themselves actively or by passive resistance, there will arise 1,000,000 new fighters who have been politically dormant, suffering in the torments of poverty and despair, having ceased to believe that they are human, that they have the right to live, that they too can be served by the entire might of the modern centralized state, that their contingents of the proletarian militia can, with the fullest confidence, also be called upon to take a direct, immediate, daily part in the state in state administration. The capitalists and landowners, with the benevolent assistance of Plekhanov, Breshkovskaya, Tseretelli, Chernoff, and company, have done everything in their power to defile the democratic republic, to defile it by servility to wealth to such a degree that the people are being overcome by apathy, indifference. It is all the same to them, because the hungry man cannot see the difference between the republic and the monarchy. The freezing, barefooted, worn-out soldier sacrificing his life for alien interests is not able to love the republic. But when every laborer, every unemployed worker, every cook, every ruined peasant sees not from the newspapers, but with his own eyes, that the proletarian state is not cringing to wealth, but is helping the poor, that the state does not hesitate to adopt revolutionary measures, that it confiscates surplus stocks and provisions from the parasites and distributes them to the hungry, that it forcibly installs the homeless in the houses of the rich, that it compels the rich to pay for milk, but does not give them a drop until the children of all poor families are sufficiently supplied, that the land is being transferred to the working people, and the factories and banks are being placed under the control of the workers, and that immediate and severe punishment is meted out to the millionaires who conceal their wealth. When the poor see and feel this, no capitalist or kulak forces, no forces of world finance capital which manipulates thousands of millions, will vanquish the people's revolution. On the contrary, the socialist revolution will triumph all over the world for its maturing in all countries. Our revolution will be invincible if it is not afraid of itself, if it transfers all power to the proletariat, for behind us stand the immeasurably larger, more developed, more organized world forces of the proletariat, which are temporarily held down by the war, but not destroyed. On the contrary, the war has multiplied them. Okay, so that's from Can the Bolsheviks Retain State Power? From October 1917. Yeah, well, thanks by V.I. Lenin. So thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Medium, and then YouTube. You could subscribe, hit the notification bell for when, I put out, new readings. Thank y'all for tuning in. Hope y'all have a great day, and Dodata Goe.